Good afternoon, Philadelphia Eagles fans. Today we have information that's creating a lot of buzz behind the scenes and could directly impact Philadelphia's plans for the season. What's even more interesting is that many people still haven't realized the full significance of what's happening within the organization. The Eagles continued to make important decisions, evaluate the roster, and prepare their next moves to keep the team among the NFL's elite. And some of these developments could completely change the direction of the season, so make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and stick around until the end because we're going to break down all the details, explain what this means for the Eagles, and discuss what could happen moving forward. Eagles fans, buckle up because the latest news coming out of Philadelphia deserves your full attention. Let's get into it. The Philadelphia Eagles may be heading into one of the most important contract decisions of the next few years, and surprisingly, it is not as straightforward as many fans expected. While Jalen Carter remains one of the most talented defensive players on the roster, recent reports suggest that the Eagles are showing hesitation when it comes to locking him into a massive long-term extension right now. At first glance, that might sound alarming, but when you look closer at the situation, there are legitimate reasons why the organization appears willing to be patient. The timing itself tells an interesting story. Philadelphia has built a reputation for rewarding its own players early. The front office, led by Howie Roseman and supported by Jeffrey Lurie, has often moved aggressively to secure cornerstone players before the market rises even higher. That strategy has helped the Eagles maintain flexibility while avoiding even larger contracts down the road. Yet here we are approaching July, and there is still no indication that a Jalen Carter extension is close to being finalized. That alone has caught the attention of many around the league. According to reports, the Eagles initially hoped to structure a deal that would provide flexibility while still securing Carter long term. However, the details apparently did not align with what Carter and his representatives were looking for. Since then, the landscape has changed significantly, especially after Tennessee defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons signed a massive extension worth 3 years and $105 million, becoming the first defensive tackle in NFL history to receive $100 million guaranteed. That contract may have completely altered the conversation. Now imagine looking at the current market through Carter's perspective. Jeffrey Simmons is averaging more than $35 million per year. Chris Jones sits among the highest paid defensive tackles in football. Former Eagle Milton Williams is earning $26 million annually. Jordan Davis recently secured a contract worth $26 million per season as well. If you are Jalen Carter and you believe you are one of the most dominant interior defenders in football, why would you settle below those numbers? That is where the challenge begins for Philadelphia. Nobody questions Carter's talent when he is at his best. Eagles fans have seen stretches where he looks nearly impossible to block. His combination of power, explosiveness, and disruption can completely change games. Offensive coordinators are forced to account for him on every snap. When he is playing at full speed, there are very few defensive tackles in the league who can match what he brings to the field. The concern is not about talent, the concern is consistency. Jeffrey Simmons has built his reputation through years of high-level production. Carter has shown flashes of dominance, but the Eagles still have questions they need answered before committing to a contract that could eventually make him one of the highest-paid defensive players in football. Questions about long-term consistency remain. Questions about conditioning have been discussed before. Questions about durability and maintaining elite production over multiple seasons continue to exist. Those concerns do not mean the Eagles are preparing to move on from Carter. In fact, there is no indication of that whatsoever. What it means is that Philadelphia may be following a strategy they have used before. Fans only need to look at Jordan Davis for a recent example. The Eagles allowed Davis to play through another season before committing major money to him. They wanted more evidence. They wanted another year of development. They wanted to be completely certain before making a massive financial investment. Eventually, Davis proved exactly what they needed to see, and the organization rewarded him accordingly. Could the same thing happen with Carter? Absolutely. If the Eagles and Carter cannot find common ground before the season begins, negotiations could reportedly pause until after the year is over. That would create an incredibly important season for both sides. For Philadelphia, it would provide another year of evaluation. For Carter, it would provide an opportunity to prove that he deserves to become the highest paid interior defensive lineman in football. The risk, however, works both ways. If Carter delivers a truly dominant season and establishes himself among the elite defenders in the NFL, his price tag could increase dramatically. Waiting could end up costing the Eagles millions upon millions of dollars. But paying now also carries risk if the organization still has unanswered questions about his long-term projection. That is the balancing act currently facing the front office. What makes this situation even more fascinating is that the Eagles have quietly continued building depth along the defensive line. Moro Ojomo has emerged as a productive player capable of contributing both inside and outside. His development gives Philadelphia options moving forward. While nobody is suggesting Ojomo can simply replace Jalen Carter, his growth provides additional flexibility as the organization evaluates its future investments. The Eagles know exactly how important the defensive line is to their identity. They have built championship-caliber rosters through dominance in the trenches, and every major decision they make reflects that philosophy. Because of that, whatever happens with Carter will likely influence several future moves across the roster. For now, there is no panic inside Philadelphia. There is no indication that the relationship is broken. There is simply a very expensive negotiation involving one of the most talented young defenders in football and a front office determined to make the smartest long-term decision possible. The next few months could end up determining whether Jalen Carter becomes the centerpiece of the Eagles' defense for years to come, or whether both sides decide to let the situation play out on the field before making history with a new contract. If you were sitting in Howie Roseman's chair right now, would you pay Jalen Carter immediately and potentially save money later, or would you wait one more season to see if he can prove beyond any doubt that he deserves to become the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL? The uncertainty surrounding Jalen Carter is not the only storyline generating discussion around Philadelphia right now. While fans continue debating the future of one of the team's most important defensive players, there are several other developments that quietly reveal how the organization is positioning itself for the future, and some of them are far more significant than they may initially appear. One of the biggest reasons for optimism comes from the continued excitement surrounding the Eagles' rookie class. Philadelphia recently finalized the rookie contract for Markel Bell, officially putting every member of the draft class under contract. While that may seem like a routine transaction on the surface, it removes distractions and allows the coaching staff to focus entirely on development as training camp approaches. And speaking of development, there is one rookie generating increasing excitement behind the scenes. The praise surrounding Lehman continues to grow. Not everyone agrees on draft evaluations, but there are people around the league who believe the Eagles may have landed one of the biggest steals of the entire first round. The belief is that the rest of the NFL could eventually regret allowing Philadelphia to select him with the 20th overall pick. That is a bold statement considering the expectations attached to first-round selections, but the confidence surrounding his fit within the Eagles' offensive system is becoming impossible to ignore. What makes the situation particularly intriguing is that Lemon is entering an offense undergoing meaningful changes. With Sean Marion now coordinating the offense and bringing influences from systems associated with Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, Philadelphia appears prepared to incorporate a wider variety of personnel packages than fans have seen in recent seasons. That naturally leads to another player whose name continues to surface in conversations about the future of the offense, Eli Stowers. There were some observers who came away from spring practices disappointed by Stowers' relatively quiet performance. On paper, many expected him to stand out immediately, particularly in non-contact environments where athletic receiving tight ends often thrive. Instead, his spring was fairly limited. However, context matters. Reports revealed that Stowers was dealing with an undisclosed injury to his right leg, limiting both his availability and the number of reps he received throughout the offseason program. That detail alone changes the conversation significantly. The Eagles did not draft Stowers expecting him to become a traditional inline blocking tight end from day one. His value comes from versatility. He is viewed as a weapon capable of impacting all levels of the passing game while creating mismatches against linebackers and defensive backs. His ability after the catch, his toughness, and his explosiveness are exactly the traits that made him one of college football's most productive tight ends. Perhaps even more encouraging is the fact that Stowers continues to invest heavily in his own development. His participation in Tight End University represents another positive step. The event is not open to everyone. Invitations are earned, and the opportunity provides young players access to elite coaching, mentorship, film study, and specialized position training alongside some of the best tight ends in football. For a player entering a new system and learning the demands of the professional level, that experience could prove invaluable. The Eagles clearly see long-term potential there, and it would be premature for anyone to make definitive judgments based solely on spring practices. Meanwhile, another story has captured attention for an entirely different reason. Jalen Hurts once again demonstrated why he continues to earn respect far beyond his performance on the football field. A pair of high school students who had operated a Jalen Hurts fan page since his rookie season eventually developed a relationship with him after meeting during the Eagles Autism Challenge. Over time, that connection grew to the point where they invited Hurts to attend their graduation ceremony. Most people would assume the invitation was simply a gesture. Instead, Hurts actually showed up. Stories like that rarely make headlines compared to contract negotiations or roster decisions, but they reveal something important about the culture Philadelphia has built around its franchise quarterback. Moments like these strengthen the connection between players and the community and help explain why Hurts continues to be viewed as a leader both inside and outside the organization. As training camp gets closer, attention will soon shift toward competition on the field. The Eagles have already announced that training camp activities begin with players reporting on July 28th, while practices officially start on July 29th. That means the countdown is rapidly approaching, and there may be another reason fans are already circling dates on the calendar. The joint practices against New England, scheduled for August 19th and August 20th, are shaping up to be must-watch events. These sessions always generate intensity, but given some of the recent storylines and history involving both organizations, there is already anticipation surrounding what those practices could look like. By the time those practices arrive, the spotlight on Jalen Carter's contract situation may be even brighter than it is today. Every dominant practice rep, every disruptive performance, and every reminder of his enormous talent could further strengthen his negotiating position. That is what makes the next phase of this story so fascinating. The Eagles are betting that patience could provide clarity. Carter is betting that his performance will justify an even larger payday. Neither side appears interested in forcing a rushed decision. Instead, both seem willing to let time reveal the answer. And if that happens, the entire conversation surrounding Carter could look very different by the end of the season. Another storyline that could have had major implications for the Eagles has suddenly taken a dramatic turn, and it revolves around quarterback Brendan Sorsby. Just a short time ago, there was legitimate buzz connecting him to Philadelphia, with multiple reports suggesting the Eagles had real interest in the former Texas Tech and Cincinnati quarterback. Now, that entire situation appears to have been